So Nigel Farage has branded Keir Starmer a coward. Why? Because he didn't even turn up for the Runcorn by-election. Here's the clip, and then I'll explain. Take a listen to this. I'll mute myself. Listen to what Nigel Farage said.
And also, just finally, you were here yesterday. Labour have thrown everything at this. Pretty much everybody has been up here, but not the Prime Minister. Why do you think that is?
Because he's a coward. He doesn't lead from the front. You know, I mean, he obviously feared they might lose, therefore he didn't come. I knocked on doors for 8 hours today, and I would have been here in this hall with our candidate, regardless whether we'd won or lost by 6 votes.
And so you caught that at the end. They won by 6 votes. Now, this is a really big deal. More about why it's a big deal in a moment, but let's just stick with the coward thing for a minute. Why did he brand him a coward? Well, because he didn't turn up to this by-election. This was a really big deal that he should have turned up and didn't turn up. This, if you remember, this by-election for the seat which Mike Amesbury resigned from. Mike Amesbury, you'll recall, was filmed punching one of his own constituents. He was then prosecuted. He was initially sentenced to 10 weeks in prison, but on appeal, that was then suspended. That would have triggered a recall petition, which would have been really embarrassing if that meant that the constituents voted for him to lose his seat. So instead, in my view, I think that's why he resigned. Now, because he resigned his seat, that's one way that it can trigger a by-election, so that seat comes up for election before a general election. There's lots of other council seats available across the country, not a massive proportion of the total seats, but I'll come back to that in a minute. But as I say, this is a really big deal. First, that the seat was up for a by-election. Secondly, that Keir Starmer didn't even bother to show up when, as you heard the reporter say, lots of other people showed up. And it's a really big deal to show up because that is a really big seat. Why is it a really big seat? And why is it a really big deal that they've lost this to Reform by just 6 votes? They demanded a recount of the vote, by the way, because it was so narrow. They didn't accept it, so they demanded a recount of the vote. But here's why it's such a big deal. Let's go back to the statistics for the general election. Mike Amesbury won that seat with Jason Moorcroft for Reform coming in second. Mike Amesbury won that seat with a majority of over 14,000 votes. In fact, it was closer to 15,000 votes. 14,696 votes. Mike Amesbury won that seat. So for a swing of such magnitude in Reform's favour, this can only be indicative of what is happening with Reform across the country. Now, a lot of people have criticised Reform. A lot of people have labelled people far right, etc. Now, I try to stay neutral on this channel. I don't sort of scream praise for one or another. I do criticise where I see it's due, and it doesn't matter who it is. I will criticise if I think that's right. That's my brutally honest opinion. Speaking of brutally honest, I now have a fantastic designer working with me, so great shout out to Martin. Has been absolutely fantastic. I will link his design company down below. You'll have seen my merch store, which is now being branded by him, not by me, as Brutally Honest Merch. And I think that's a really great name to go with. Lots of merch available. Check that out. The fantastic designs. But brutally honest, if you like my brutally honest opinion of what's going on, please do subscribe to the channel. So this is history we are seeing here. History being made. We've got Reform taking over this seat where Labour, it was considered a safe, obviously it was considered a safe seat with a majority of over 14,000 votes. He won that seat. So maybe Keir Starmer didn't show up because he didn't think he needed to. Maybe he just thought that's a safe seat. That's fine. Or if I was being less charitable and went with Nigel Farage's view, maybe he thought that they might lose and therefore didn't want the embarrassment of showing up in an area where they lose drastically a very safe seat that did have over 14,000, nearly 15,000 vote majority, losing to Reform. That would have been, and indeed is, rather embarrassing. I think that is really embarrassing. Now, before we get too carried away with these local elections, etc., I read that there are some 1,600 odd council seats up for election out of around 17,000 seats across England. Now, we are yet to hear from a great number of results insofar. Labour has narrowly retained Doncaster, West of England and North Tyneside. However, there is another significant win for reform, that is, for Greater Lincolnshire. Now, even before I give you that result, if you haven't read it already, just let me know in the comments below, whilst you're watching this, I'll give you time to type it, whether you think reform has won this seat by a few votes, a few tens of votes, a few hundred votes, a few thousand votes, or what. Just type me something in the comments. I'd like to get a feel for what you think if you don't already know. If you know, then you know, but just let me know what sort of gap you think reform won this vote by. Now you've had time to do that, let's take a look. So here's the Greater Lincolnshire mayoralty election results, with Andrea Jenkins winning this by almost 40,000 votes majority. This is just staggering. And not only that, the runner-up is Conservative, with Labour coming in third place with Jason Stockwood. So all commiserations to both of those. But the difference between the Conservative vote and the Reform vote is almost 40,000 vote majority. This, I suggest, without nailing any colours to the mast here, I'm calling it as it is. This, in my view, is indicative not just of what's going to happen across the country over the next few years, not necessarily in this local election, but maybe in this local election. We'll get more results later on today and we'll see what those suggest. But to me, it is a strong indicator of what's going to happen in the next general election. I think this is indicative of a significant wipeout of both Conservative and Labour. And so for me, this definitively puts reform on the map. If you didn't consider it to be there already, it definitively puts it on the map for the next general election and anything that happens to pop up in the meantime. Of course, other seats can become available. People can resign. People can get prosecuted, as we've seen. They can get prosecuted. If they get sentenced to prison, they can then trigger a recall petition, or they may just resign either because of that or for any other reason. So other seats can pop up, and this is perhaps indicative of what might happen in those seats. And it definitively tells you that there is now a serious risk for the Conservative Party, because with the 38,500 votes between the two, this was not just a bit of a win. This was a landslide in favour of reform. And whether you support reform or not, you can only offer congratulations to such a significant win here, because this is indicative of what the country is thinking. Now, why do I think this is happening? Now, I tend to steer away from my opinions on this channel, but I'll throw a bit of an opinion out here. All of the reasons that I've been talking about on this channel, with promises made and promises not kept, promises very much not kept, via the council tax, national insurance, all these sorts of things, the only promises that Labour seem to have kept are the ones that are damaging to people. For example, VAT on school fees. Now, whether you support private schools or not, you cannot ignore the damage that this is doing. Now, many schools have closed. Many schools may have closed anyway, but many of them have been pushed to closing because of the additional hits to the business rates relief, to the VAT on the school fees, and the third hit with the employer national insurance. Because obviously, schools are a staff-heavy organisation. Any organisation, any company that is staff-heavy, in fact, we've had a number of companies and a number of schools that are hundreds of years old, really very much the pride of this country, closing down and going out of business because they simply cannot afford the ongoing staff costs, the business costs, the rates, the energy prices that we're paying, the increase in prices, both in supply, and therefore the ongoing knock-on costs to the consumer. Therefore, people are buying less and so on. And growth, whilst we've seen a little bit of fluctuation in growth, it's not exactly the growth that Rachel Reeves wanted to see. And that, coupled with the illegal migration and Keir Starmer's very tired smashing the gangs motif, which is clearly not working. On these figures alone, we have over 1,400 illegal migrants crossing the channel by small boats. You can see on each of these days, 5 boats, 8 boats, 8 boats, 5 boats. This is a steady flow of illegal migrants entering the country. Over 1,400. I actually read somewhere that it's over 1,500 because these statistics are not quite accurate. But the reported statistics here that I'll go with is over 1,400. 1,436 illegal migrants crossing the channel. So Keir Starmer saying that he's going to stop the boats and smash the gangs, and this is all the Conservatives' fault because they were in government, etc. Well, that stopped. That excuse, that argument, blaming another government is dead now, because that is past. This is the present. If he really wanted to stop these boats, they could physically go and stop these boats and say to France, we're very sorry, but we cannot take 1,400 migrants a week these current figures, we just cannot sustain this. This is unsustainable. And if France don't like the fact that we return those migrants, then they can return them from whence they came. But we don't do that. We're not doing that. They are arriving here, and apparently there's not a lot we can do about it, because they won't do anything about it. They are supposedly, and I've seen, to be fair, I have seen some of the videos where they are going to destroy the boats and seize the boats and arrest people, etc. But as someone on X commented just the other day, this is no different really to a game of whack-a-mole, where the thing pops up and you're just hitting one and another one pops up in its place. If we liken this to the supply of illicit substances problem, to jump around the YouTube algorithm a little bit, if we liken it to that problem, then another gang and another dealer just pop up in their place, because it's a lucrative business. Clearly, it's a lucrative business because people are paying for it. Why are they paying for it? Because it's attractive to be here. With the usual caveat, some people really need our help, some people deserve our help, and we should help some people that are fleeing war-torn countries. But apart from that, they might be here purely as economic migrants because it's attractive here. They will get housing and food and medical services and free money and so on. This is not me making this up, and this is not right-wing spiel that I'm giving you here. This is exactly what's happening. So we have 1,436 migrants. On these statistics, I read that it's more than that, just in the last week alone, each of whom will be housed and fed and health checks and all the rest of it. They will doubtless each put in their asylum claim. Some of them will disappear. Some of them will likely go on to assault people and be prosecuted, etc. And even then, they might then file ECHR claims to remain in the country. And this is a long, laborious process. And so for me, this is one of the many reasons I think these numbers have skewed massively in favour of reform. So whether you support reform or not, I think they are owed congratulations, because that is a significant win, with winning what was a very safe seat for Labour and a 40,000 vote majority for Greater Lincolnshire. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know whether you support reform or not. Let me know if you support Labour or not and you still watch my channel. Either way, I'd be interested in your views, and I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.